All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Dedicated Show. My name is Kate Strashny. I'll be your host for today. And I'm really excited to get back into doing the Dedicated Show. We've been gone for about a month since 2022 has closed out. So really excited to bring back the show. This is the first show of the year. So welcome. Today we have a special treat. We're going to talk to you about data visualization, do's and don'ts, basically getting into when to follow the rules and when to break them. I know everyone's excited about this. I see a really engaged audience in the chat already. So really, really happy to see everybody joining in. I see Ravit's here. Satya Bhatta's here. Andrew, hello, everybody. Hi, Ryan. Really, really excited to host everyone here. Few quick notes. I'll remind you, if you have not been to a dedicated show yet or recently, we take questions from the live audience almost as they come in. So keep those questions coming in as early as right now, and we'll try to take them, take as many as we possibly can throughout the show. Let's see. We had a question here from Sam asking if this is going to be recorded. Sam, yes, this will stay on LinkedIn and on YouTube, so you'll be able to watch the replay. One thing you won't be able to do in the replay, though, which is why I highly encourage you to stick around for the live show, is to get a chance to win some books. So our guest for today, first I'll tell you about that, and then I'll talk about some giveaways. Our guest for today is Neil Richards. He is the Global Data Fluency Lead at JLL, and he's also the author of Questions in Dataviz, a design-driven process for data visualization. And yes, you will have a chance to win a copy of his book today. And you'll also have a chance to win a copy of my book called ColorWise. Now, how to play, very simple. Just type in the hashtag books, literally hashtag books, into either the Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitch, or YouTube stream, whichever stream you just decided to join us on today. And we will select a winner halfway through the show and then select a winner towards the end of the show. We'll start with Neil Richards' book, and then towards the end, I'll give away my book. All right. I'm going to stop talking here and actually bring on our guest speaker. Neil, welcome to the Dedicated Show.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Kate. I'm excited to be on here. First one of the year. Thanks for inviting me on.
And thank you so much for being the first one of the year. I see the audience is just really happy to have a show. So, and I think they're also very excited about the actual topic, right? We're talking about data viz, do's and don'ts. We'll talk about rules. When do we break them? When do we follow them? And we'll also talk about your book. I think a good place for us to get started is tell the audience a bit about yourself. What is it that you do? And tell us a little bit about the book as well.
Okay, so I work essentially as a data analyst, and I've been working in data visualization, so in BI for about 5 or 6 years. I use Tableau a lot, and I use that for my day-to-day work. And I also love to use Tableau for personal projects, for more creative kind of stuff as well. So as part of that, I've been recognized as a Tableau visionary. I used to be called Zen Master, now called Visionary. I've been recognized that about 4 times now. So essentially, that's what I love to do. I love to combine doing sort of traditional BI data visualization in my role, and also having a bit of fun with outside of work with more creative data visualization, that kind of thing. So anything that I can do that sort of stretches the boundaries as well. And that's it. I mean, I'm getting used to the idea of also being able to call myself an author, because my book on the subject that we're going to talk about today is out.
Yes, and huge congratulations on that. Somehow I know how that feels. Getting your book out there and being able to call yourself like a real author. And yeah. I want to start with the book, right? Why did you decide to write this book? What is the book about, and who's it for?
Well, it's interesting. I always kind of wondered if I wanted to write a book, one of those kind of lifetime goals. I remember a few years ago, I tried to write fiction, and it was absolutely awful. I was embarrassed to show it to anyone. But in terms of a data viz book, I wondered if I could write a book. I didn't feel like I was at kind of industry expert level to write a sort of how-to book. So I thought perhaps the only way that I could do it would be if I positioned it pretty much to to write what I know about. And that's what they say, write what you know. And so I wondered if there was a chance to pitch a book for people like me, people who know a little bit of data visualization, maybe do some BI for their jobs, know how to do a few good charts or two, but always wondered, well, how can I do some of the more creative stuff I've seen, or the more unusual stuff, the kind of stuff that I might see in my feed online, or in in coffee table data visualization books. I don't necessarily have all the answers, but I realize it involves asking a lot of questions. It involves thinking, right, what can I do differently from what I do now to, what different thought processes do I need to have if I want to think about a bit like that person? And so I kind of I didn't expect the book to go very far. I knew I could base it on my blog, and my blog, which I sort of have been writing since I started data visualization. I've asked a lot of questions like that as well, and it turned out kind of when I pitched the book, people said, "Well, actually, that's quite a unique idea. It's the level that you're pitching at your kind of maybe not intro but not expert level, and it sort of bridges the gap between BI and creative stuff. I think that we're willing to sort of to take a chance on something that hadn't really been done before."
Mm-hmm. And I personally love it. I was just I was telling you before the session started that it's such a beautiful book too. If you guys want to quickly take a peek, I mean, there's an image almost on every single page, and I like pictures. I think ever
Oh,
since you're not 9 years old, you stop reading picture books, but I miss it. It makes it so much more engaging, and it's so colorful. It's so well made. So I'm very glad that you decided to write a book and you found a topic that not only you knew well about, but also interested you enough to write. It's a pretty big book. It's what, over 300 pages. That's
yeah, thank you.
impressive.
And I don't want to bore the people watching us about sort of author stuff, but I'm sure you can appreciate when I got it, and I was so relieved when I opened it. I thought, oh, it looks nice, it looks shiny, the image quality is good. I thought, oh, it's not going to be black and white, is it? It's not going to be really poor, but I'm really pleased with the quality that the publishers have done.
Oh, absolutely. It makes a world of difference.
I love.
And since we're talking about books, we've got a question here from Ravit. He's asking about 3 of your favorite books on Dataviz. The pressure's on.
Yeah. First of all, I'll say I love Dataviz books, and on my website, I've really been trying to sort of read and review a lot of books. So
Mm-hmm.
um, there are so many to choose from. The first one I will say is well, either the Truthful Art or the Functional Art by Alberto Cairo. I love both of those, and I love Alberto's insight on data visualization. It was a real sort of introduction to me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as to the sort of thought processes behind it, and I realized, how it's possible to do the right thing, how it's possible to do the wrong thing, and so I would definitely recommend. I'm struggling to choose one or other of them, but they're two from the same series. A second one I would definitely recommend is Data Sketches, and that's by Nadia Bremer and Shirley Wu. Basically, because they do the kind of data visualizations that I wish I could do. They do super beautiful, creative stuff. They
Mm-hmm.
they explain the whole process behind this project of 12 beautiful visualizations each that they did. And it was actually that book that made me figure out who published that book and write to them on Twitter and say, hey, if ever I wanted a book, what did I have to do? And they said, pitch it and you will see. And so to be in the same series as that is an absolute honor. And for my third one, oh my goodness, where do I even look? I'm looking at one of my shelves behind me. I think if I pick a third one, I'm ruling out so many others. All right, I found one here. Info We Trust. Info We Trust by R.J. Andrews is it's such a nice. It's a beautiful read. It's all about data in particular, not necessarily data visualization, but data. But he recounts it like a storyteller, and there is so many stories behind, about how he says it. And by the time you finish reading it, you're just sort of so much more inspired to go out and do things with data. I'll probably regret like 10 others I could have said because
It's tough. It's tough. It's like choosing
yeah,
your favorite
but
children. It's like
that's right. Yeah,
you
books
love
can
them
really
all.
inspire you, and it's hard to know how. So yeah, just get a little bit from all of these different things.
Awesome. Well, we're here to talk about Dataviz rules, right? The do's and don'ts. And I think a good place for us to start is we're not going to get in depth into many of these, but off the top of your head, let's list off some Dataviz best practices, some rules that we think we cannot break. So let's you start, and maybe I'll add some on as you go.
Yeah. So probably the one best practice that I really don't like breaking. Most I will bend, but the one I really won't is all about bar charts. Don't truncate your bar charts, kids. That you really mustn't do that. Start them at 0. So that's one I would start with.
Okay. Well, okay, we can take turns. I love this, Neil. Okay, my
Oh, it's like yeah.
this would be good. This would be good. And those in the
Yeah.
audience, if we're missing something, jump in. We'll just take a minute or two to jot these down. So I'm obviously going to talk about color. I think using color intentionally,
Yes.
making sure that you're not just choosing colors because you wanted to for no reason, right? Be very intentional use of color. I'm going to write that down.
Absolutely, yes. Intentional use of color. What are the best practices are there? There's a lot written about white space, isn't there, and how to really sort of use your data ink ratio.
Yes,
So
I love that one.
that one.
All right, mine are not all going to be about color, but the next one is also color. So making sure that you're taking color blindness or color vision deficiency into account. So accessibility is what I'll put on there, making sure your color accessibility.
And right, crikey, what are the best principles are there? See, I think there are so many, but so many of these I kind of challenge. So I think there's good principles, and
Oh, we're going to challenge some of these, absolutely.
oh yeah, no. What I would definitely, what I really found interesting as I got into data visualization was Gestalt principles. So if you haven't heard of Gestalt principles, and I had never heard of Gestalt principles until I got into data visualization, and it really is a really simple, if you like, explanation as to how our brain works, how we understand data visualization, how our precognition works. So from Gestalt principles, you realize, why a lot of things are good practices. So I kind of put that one in there.
Yes, that one covers a great deal of best practices, the Gestalt. And I know you covered it in your book as well. I think I was first introduced to this when I read Cole Nussbaum or Knaflich's book on data storytelling. That was sort of my entryway into data visualization best practices. And then I just dove deep into more research. I think I'll just add one more is just selecting the right chart, right? Making sure that you pick the right chart for the right data. So we're not using a line graph when a bar chart is better, or a pie chart where a histogram is better, or other way around. Now we've got plenty of other rules that we're not going to get into just because of time, and this is not a workshop on visual best practice.
No. Yeah.
So chart selection. So we've got 6 that we noted down. Let's just talk briefly about maybe each one and how we can end up breaking those rules. So if we start with don't truncate your bar chart, is there a time that you ever might? I can think of one, but
Well, yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? The one I can think of is temperatures. People
you
use.
stole mine. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, there are very few examples, aren't there? People use the don't truncate bar charts very literally, and they will use it with temperatures as well. But then you have to consider that a temperature doesn't really mean anything, or it's not a collection of things. Celsius and Fahrenheit start at different temperatures, at different numbers, and they're both kind of arbitrary. So don't feel that you have to do it there anyway. I probably wouldn't use a bar chart with temperatures for that reason, but sometimes it's okay to. And if you do, then yeah, don't feel like you have to go all the way down to 0, because your 0 is different to my 0, for example. So
Right, that's true. And we've got a question here from Dustin. We mentioned Gestalt principles. What's your favorite Gestalt principle? Do you have one?
Blimey, I don't think I have one. What do I put in there?
I'm trying to see if you put.
I think the Gestalt principle that I would potentially think of is, I I don't know. I don't have a favorite. They're all so sensible. It's very difficult to go against a Gestalt principle. I have one
Yes.
example that I do deliberately go against in the book, and I got quite a lot of stick for doing that, and rightly so. I'm the principle, and I can't remember what it's called, where we see things that are all sort of collected together as one unit, as one kind of
Connectedness, closure.
is probably it would probably be either of those, connectedness,
Okay.
probably connectedness and closure. But I came up with an example where I probably bent a few too many rules, where I decided to just sort of put group together two completely different categories and confuse people into thinking that they were one. And yeah, perhaps I was taking a few risks on that. And it's with anything like this, it's when you bend or break a rule, whether you're right to or wrong to, that's why you understand why the rules and the principles are there in the first place, and
Mm-hmm.
why they are good things to follow. And I would say just never go out there just to do, never to go out and bend or break a rule or anything like that for the sake of it.
Right.
Understand why it's there, and understand, if I do decide to do this differently, there's going to be a trade-off. There's going to be a trade-off, probably of legibility or ease of understanding, or acceptance, even in my readers or audience.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think these are always things that you need to be aware of.
Yes. And we talked about white space as well. And I think you mentioned that in your book, where you had a nice line chart graphic, and then you had some annotations, and then you showed a
Mhm.
difference of without annotations, with annotations. What is your preference? Do you prefer having that white space, or do you prefer providing that context for the visualization by adding some annotations that explain sort of the big dip or the increase?
Uh, Again, I don't want to start this by saying it depends, because that can say it's
Oh,
an
that's
easy
depending.
answer
Yes.
to anything. I do like good annotations. Some The reason I'm hesitating is because I also sometimes like completely unannotated graphs or unannotated charts, and I don't mind people taking a while to read and understand them, so long as that explanation is somewhere, so long as that is there for them to be able to see. But from a context of readability, I think annotation is brilliant, and I think it should, if you want to get the message across well principled and well read, it can be so important to include some of these annotations. Not to overclutter your chart with them, so to carefully design your chart so that there's room for the annotations and they can be easily, read and accessed and understood.
Yeah, I think for me it would depend if I'm there or not. So if I'm not there, I think I'd be more okay with the annotation sort of not being there, where I can
Yeah,
provide context. But if it's being sent in an email, then 100% annotation, so it's very clear as to what I'm trying to say.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. And if you're there to talk through or explain a chart or a graph, then often less is best, because they can then you know you can then grab their attention with what you want to say and the context that you want to add, and that can be more memorable.
Yes, absolutely. All right, before we take the next question, a quick reminder for everyone that we are doing a giveaway. So if you want to play, just type in hashtag books, and after this next question, we will announce the first winner. First winner is getting Neil's book. Second winner is getting a ColorWise book. All right, here is your question, Neil, from McDonough. What was the biggest mistake you've ever made in data visualization?
Oh, I don't know. I make mistakes in data visualization every day. Sometimes the biggest mistakes come from not understanding the data, or from just blindly visualizing what you have and then realizing, actually, I have no right to be doing this, or I'm visualizing this the wrong way. Um,
Mm.
there are some mistakes which are sort of, you do need some kind of data literacy to kind of understand. So sometimes a mistake that is easy to do is maybe visualize the average of averages. So let's say you have one thing, um, your average sales price for one country is $100, and your average sales price for another country is $120. You can't just put them together and average them and say, hey, my average is $110, because maybe that first country had 1,000 sales and that second country only had 10 sales. So you need to understand the context. You need to go back to the numerator and denominator and get your correct your correct figure that way. So that's something that I have fallen foul for in the past, and it can be not easy to understand until it's pointed out to you. When it's pointed out to you, and you can go, oh my goodness, it's obvious. But if you're not paying attention, so if you're just maybe blindly taking the data and putting it into your tool and visualizing what comes out, sometimes it will lead you to make mistakes like that.
Yes, it's always the, what is it, hindsight is 2020, when somebody says you should do it that way, and you're like, oh yeah, why didn't I see it this way before? So I appreciate you sharing that with us. It's time for our first giveaway. So I'm going to put this back on screen. #books. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click draw. So for the lucky winner, I'm going to write down the name just so I don't forget. Lucky winner number 1 is James Emery. Congratulations. In order to get the book, just send either me or Neil a note on LinkedIn, and we'll make sure that we get you a copy of the book. Keep playing, by the way, for the next 20-30 minutes. We'll select another winner for ColorWise. All right, going back to our questions here. We had a question here from a LinkedIn user. Any thoughts on when to use dynamic measures, dimensions, and sheet swaps versus more of a static controlled view?
Again, my thoughts are really, it depends on your audience. So if you're at work and you're creating a dashboard, then I think dynamic measures and sheet swaps can be ideal, and particularly often that's what your client wants or your end user wants. They want to see everything, or they want to have something which allows them to go and interact and see everything possible. I'm not always a big fan of that, although I appreciate sometimes when you have a lot of information, that's the best thing or the best way that the client might want to be able to see it. And it's up to you then to design it well to make sure that it can happen. I do like a static visualization myself, and I feel that if you can include everything that's relevant in something static, so that you take that interactivity out. If you don't require your reader to use the interactivity, then you've done a great job in just including everything that's necessary. So I kind of have a preference for more static visualizations, but there's very much a place for the more dynamic interactive style, and often that is going to be the case in a sort of dynamic dashboard that you're going to deliver for an internal client.
Right. I think I have a personal preference of static dashboards as well, but the only interactivity I require is that if I want to click into something and get more detail, I want that to open just another view, right? So not something that constantly just keeps moving around, because that can be a little confusing when it's too many moving parts. I think it's fun and it's flashy and it's looks interesting, but sometimes static. The simpler the better, where you're just getting the message across.
Right.
All right. So we talked a bit about other types of data visualizations, right? So we have pie charts, bar charts, line graphs, and then you mentioned, I think, in the data sketches book, where you have the very pretty visuals. I call them data art, because it's not just the data visualization or dashboard. And I wanted you to share your thoughts on, when do you think it's appropriate to use this sort of data art, and when is it not appropriate to do so?
First of all, I love data art, and that's probably what sort of inspired me to create most things, and many of the things that you'll find in the book. I'm even sat, which was left, which was right. I'm even sat in front of what I considered a bit of data art, just a bit of fun way of visualizing something in a very sort of abstract way. And again, it really depends on your audience and your purpose of doing something. I love data visualization because for me, it's a creative output. And if you ever saw me write or paint or anything like that, you realize that I've always struggled with creative outputs until data visualization came along. So it's something that I do very much for almost for my own reasons, and for pleasure, and to share with people who will appreciate the same kind of thing. Now, that's very much not something that you would do if you had business results that you wanted to take to the boardroom, or you had a dashboard that you want. Sometimes you think, oh, can I do something a little bit more creative? And the answer is almost always no. And I've always been able to have that kind of separation between almost between business and pleasure, if you like, between between functional and aesthetic, or between yes, does the job and looks pretty. That's not to say that you can't make some really nice aesthetic decisions in something functional as well. And there's a real kind of skill to balancing that. But as with anything, you always sort of need to consider your audience, and very often when you're doing something that is more art style or more creative, it's maybe, I don't know, maybe it's the same consideration you have when you're doing anything that's artistic. It's only going to be appreciated by people who appreciate it, which that kind of sounds obvious, but it's appreciated by yourself as well as going through the process of doing it. And what I've often found is when you are doing something a little bit more unconventional, the technical tricks that you learn, or the skills that you get, very often you will do them first on something a little bit more unconventional, or maybe it was a personal project or something more creative, and then a few weeks or months later you bring them back into your job and think, that was the trick I needed to do to get that triangle working. That's the same kind of trick I need to do to get the right level of detail, for the figures I'm pulling into this table. So the skills are quite sort of interconnecting in that way. But I do, to answer the original question, I do sort of try and fully kind of acknowledge the different situations, if you like, business versus pleasure almost.
And that makes sense. So we shared two examples. One is where you're delivering to a more of an accepting creative audience, and the other one was the more professional boardroom. I had an experience where I was tasked with creating a bit more of an unexpected data visualization. And I think the only reason it worked was because we presented it in a way that made a lot of sense to the audience. We made sure they understood what each piece was saying, what it was doing. And then we consistently used that same graphic every week, every month that we came to that, that committee. So they were already aware. So it was some education, in the beginning, where we had to explain a bit more, whereas a bar chart, my children ages, I think starting at age 3, they were able to understand what a bar chart was, and sort of get that understanding.
I think, and one thing I'm learning more and more as I'm moving into a data fluency kind of role, is that anything that you present, it does need that extra layer of interaction and training and just sort of being there with the client to make sure that they understand it. So in that sense, there can be room sometimes for something more. I mean, if you take the example of a Sankey chart, for example, a Sankey chart can divide a lot of opinions. It's a kind of chart, and if you don't know if everyone knows it, where you sort of have a flow of widths, which will be proportional to the value into the two different areas there. And Sankey charts, they look cool and they're difficult to do, and it's a really satisfying thing if you can get it right. And even if by getting it right you had to go to these blog posts to figure out how to do it. And quite often you might see someone, as soon as they realize that, want to do it in a business chart, and all right, most of the time it's not the appropriate use, but sometimes it is. Sometimes you can find a clever use, and it actually fits. Maybe the data really is talking about the flow from one part to another, and the Sankey chart can work, and it can be more engaging. Now, you still need to follow that up with a lot of training, a lot of understanding, maybe a bit of hand-holding of people as they go through it. But given that you kind of have to do that a little bit with simpler charts anyway, or with simpler dashboards, just so that people understand what the data is that's in there. They might understand what a bar chart is, but they might need that a bit more explanation as to what is this actual measure that we're showing anyway.
Yes, I think I've only successfully managed to use a Sankey chart once in my professional life. So
yes,
and it made sense, and people got it. But I only had that one opportunity.
Yeah.
All right, going back to audience questions now. So we've got one here from Denholm. How do you measure the success or impact of data visualization? So you've created a chart or graphic or dashboard. How do we know if it's a success or a flop?
That's a good question. Two kind of answers really, and which I think we need to be better at doing. The way that you might tend to look at it, which is, I don't know, it's kind of obvious, but doesn't necessarily always get to it, is how many views has this had, how many interactions this has had, what's the counter on the server, or if you've done something personal, how many likes and retweets did it get? And that's a measurement of engagement and success, kind of up to a point. But again, I think the best thing is to actually have a follow-up session, have a survey afterwards, or have a talk to the people who your visualization was intended for, and find out what they thought. Find out if they used it. I want to quickly mention visforsocialgood.com, which is a project I've been very much involved with up until now, which is it's an opportunity for people to sign up and work with data sets from nonprofits, and it really that always feels like a good chance to make impact, because you'll be supplied with a data set from a nonprofit who they know they've got some useful data, but they maybe don't have the time or the skills or the data person in their organization to be able to sort of come up with something. And so just having the opportunity to report back to the clients, and not just produce your visualization or your dashboard, but to dial in and talk and say, here you are, we found this out. We found that your projects have been helping 1,000 villages in 3 different countries, and you can gauge the impact a lot more in just these conversations afterwards than you can just with I don't know, just with producing something, putting it out there, and maybe seeing view figures, that kind of thing.
Right.
It's not an easy question to answer.
It's not. No, I think for me personally, it's usually the usability. Like you started off with, how many people have viewed it, how many people have used it, and I think the most discouraging moments in my professional life when I was in data visualization was when I would get a request that says, Kate, we must have this dashboard. We need it. It is so important. Everyone's going to use it. So you buckle down, you get all the data, clean it, wrangle, whatever, structure. I was in Tableau as well. So in Tableau, get all that stuff going, make it perfect, publish, send it out. And then you wait. And then like one person goes in there a month. And I'm like,
yeah,
this is really that urgent. Did you really need this one? So.
Well, that's right. And, there's so many things that beyond whether a dashboard or a visualization is good or bad, that can impact. It can be something completely out of your control. It can go from being urgent to not being urgent, or the person who needed it, can have moved on and their new team didn't know anything about it. So it doesn't, something like that is never going to be something that you can easily measure. Something that only gets, just because it only got 3 views doesn't mean it was rubbish, and vice versa.
Yes. I agree. I mean, I was quite proud of it. I think I should have just done a bit more research in terms of making sure there really was a need, and this wasn't just a one-off report that somebody needed. I ended up building a dynamic dashboard, which I did not need to do. All right, let's move on to data skills, data viz skills. We've got a question here around, what is the biggest skill you need to develop to become a data viz expert, regardless of the tool that we're going to be using?
I don't know what the biggest skill is, but I think in many ways it's around communication and practice. So it's the skill of understanding what your client or your user wants, and that's not necessarily the first thing you might have thought of, or it's not necessarily what's going to come straight out of the data if you sort of go plowing in. And probably many of us will know that kind of situation of I don't know, the dashboard or the app that will repeatedly be changed or have new requests or something like that, and that can often be just because we didn't quite sort of nail down what the requirement was in the first place. I don't think it's an easy skill to master. I don't even claim it's a skill that I particularly have, but I think it's something you get slowly better at. But one thing I always do say is it's not it's not the super mathematicians that make great data visualizations people, or the super creative artists or anything like that. You will see, and I would always welcome in a team such a wide range of skills and backgrounds, and often it's not necessarily the analytic skills. It can be the softer skills, the creative skills, the persuasive skills. Any combination can really just sort of can add to a great team or a great well-rounded data visualization person.
Right. So you don't have to be technically the smartest. You don't have to be the most artistically creative. You basically have to be able to present the insights in a way that your audience can understand them and take action.
Yeah. So I think it's I think it's all about sort of listening and understanding and gaining experience. I mean, I can just sort of roll off the degrees of people I know who had who had gone into data visualization. I'm a bad example because I am a mathematician, but I know musicians, architects, physicists, chemists, historians, ancient classic studies. Anything that just sort of gives you that curiosity. I think it all comes down to curiosity. And I think that's such a great skill to have, because that keeps you interested in what you're doing, and that gives you the incentive, and it means you're just as interested in what comes out the other end as your client is.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. I think curiosity is what helped me when I was learning Tableau. Much like yourself, I think it's pretty common. And those in the audience, let us know if this is accurate for you as well. If you're working in the data visualization space and you have an actual job and you have to work on the specific reports using the data that you're provided, and you're learning all these skills, and now you know how to visualize things, you sort of have this desire to take this personally and start creating something for yourself. So I started visualizing other things like the books I read, or the miles I've run, or just something, the push-ups I did. Like I just started visualizing anything and everything and trying to make cool visualizations. And I think that actually helped me be better at work, much like you said earlier, where you pick up some skills and you're like, oh, now I can translate that for work as well.
Yeah. And that's how I got started as well. How I got started in Tableau. It was a slowish start, because when I first saw it, I was working in a market research agency, and we didn't really understand at the time, how it could deal with survey data, or how it, how it would work, how it could visualize it. It seemed a great idea. And then when I first looked at Tableau, it was all about sales and profits. And I thought, well, I get it, but is it for me? I don't know. And then it was only when I picked it up and I put in, I found two data sets. One was house prices, and we were just moving house. And one was cricket scores, because I love sports and cricket. And I put them in, and I would start to play. I thought, oh, I get it now. This is fun. And the house prices one was one I could instantly use and sort of see, where we might would move to. The cricket one was, it made sense to me because I was so much more familiar with the data, and it would come up with answers which I knew were true, because it was the same things, that I'd seen online. And so it just takes some time. It takes that data that you're curious about in order to spark and just sort of get the get the momentum behind the learning process.
Yeah, absolutely. And this leads us in nicely to my next question, which is around, professionals who are in the audience who want to get started in data visualization or improve their skills. What would you recommend that they do? What are the top, 2 or 3 things that they can do, maybe even today, to get into that data visualization space?
I would say, well, I would say keep an eye out, because there are sort of data visualization roles. The way I got started was, data visualization was very much on the periphery, and I started using Tableau Public, which is a free download, which allows you to use Tableau and to visualize data, and then to publish that online. And along with that, there were a number of community projects, and there's great blogs and online content and showing you how to do it, and different community projects such as Makeover Monday, which is a website where you can go and you can always have a sort of weekly data set. And in my case, what it allowed me to do was, when I was sort of using it to slowly and tentatively professionally, it allowed me to be more, to learn more quickly, to keep up a pace, to experiment, be creative, but also to have an online portfolio of things that I had done. And if you have an online portfolio, you can decide what am I going to be, into? Am I going to try and create really nice looking business dashboards that I get better and better at? Am I going to start doing some more creative, innovative visualization? And it's up to you. Now, I mentioned Tableau because it was my way in, my entry. I believe there's probably opportunities to do the same thing with other visualization tools. If you can get hold of them for free, you can still use the same kind of community initiatives that are out there. But that's certainly what I would recommend. And I do recommend it out of practice because it did work for me. Being able to demonstrate that portfolio of what I had enabled me to go sort of into entry level and beyond, through that recognition.
It's interesting. I followed the same path. So when I got into Tableau, I absolutely loved that Makeover Monday challenge. I tried to do it every week actually, and it was so exciting because my process was get the data, think of some visualization, maybe sketch it out and build. And then as I evolved, I wanted to try building different things, but I lacked inspiration because, if you see it, then you believe it can be done and then you can do it. So what I started doing was I would go on Twitter and I would look for the hashtag Makeover Monday hashtag, click on it, and then see all these amazing visualizations come through. And now the best part about Tableau is the fact that you can click on it, and a lot of times you can download the workbook and see exactly how it was built. And then obviously don't copy everything, but it's a great way to pick up new skills. So I highly recommend that one as well.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes. And we have a question here from Ramon about Tableau or Power BI. I know you mentioned you've mainly used Tableau, Neil. I've actually used Tableau as my first tool, and then I was asked to teach a course on data visualization that would involve Power BI, so I had to learn that one. Similarly with Qlik Sense and Sense and Excel and then R and Python, I was so excited to just try and learn as many data viz tools. But I think personally, if I had to create something really quick right now, I'd probably go into Tableau, or I really like Data Wrapper as well.
Yes,
just so quick and easy. And yeah,
I agree. And there are, I mean, I can't really answer that one because I just have experience in one and not in the other, so it wouldn't be fair. But you are right, and this kind of answers the previous question as well. There are some great free data visualization tools out there that have really taken off in the last years, like Data Wrapper and like Flourish and like one or two others as well. And it's I think some of these can be almost better quick hit ways of getting something really nice and professional and insights into your data, if you don't know either of those two.
Yes, absolutely. We have a question from Nigel here. So he says, I use Qlik Sense and Qlik, but looking for good ways to make standout visualizations for audiences, like getting the messages across of what the data shows. I'll let you take this one. I have an answer as well.
No, for me, and again, I don't know Qlik Sense and Qlik, but for me, it's a kind of, the question is not related to the tool. So the good ways to make standout visualizations for audiences, it's getting the message across the data shows. That's the skill that you learn, I guess, as you do more and more data visualization. So it's following the principles. It's following you mentioned Cole, Nussbaumer, Knaflic, and the storytelling principles, and just so whether it's removing the clutter or whether it's really sort of putting the headline the headline message in there. There's all the different advice as to what the data shows and how to get it across. Is none of these are answers that are related to Tableau or Qlik or Power BI or anything like that. It again, I think probably comes with practice and just sort of using good principles. And I noticed actually when I saw in the chat and the comments there when I was sort of coming up with some of the main skills required. A lot of people said storytelling,
Yes.
and I was looking at, hey, has has it changed? They were all going hashtag books, and now they're all going storytelling. I said, is there another giveaway? I thought, oh no, we just have a lot of agreement as to another great skill required there. So,
Yes.
and there's lots of books and opinion and thought on what storytelling actually means or the best ways of going about it, but ultimately they're going to kind of overlap and agree that it's getting that message across in a way that's a bit like a storytelling way that it's the real thing to aim for.
Yes, absolutely. And yeah, Nigel, just wanted to add for your Qlik Sense question, you can use the Makeover Monday challenge that Neil and I were talking about earlier. It is mainly targeted for Tableau, but that shouldn't stop you. You can still get an Excel file of data, pop it into Qlik Sense, and go along with the challenge using your own tool of preference. The tool really does not matter that much. No. And yes, we'll take maybe one more question. Just a quick reminder, it's hashtag books to play. We'll do the giveaway in a couple of minutes. The question I had for you, Neil, was how do you see this field evolving? So data visualization, right? Tableau's come a long way. I think new tools have come out that are sort of changing the landscape a bit. So wanted to get your thoughts on what can we expect to see in the future?
It's interesting, actually. We mentioned new tools, and that's probably one of the answers to this question as well. I think data visualization is probably going to become more and more accessible to more and more people with some of the some of the tools which make it more easy to access data. I think, and I'm interested to see the way this goes, because I'm a little bit sort of reticent about it. Perhaps it's just my age, but the idea of AI coming into visualization and machine learning as well. A lot of the tools are looking into trying to sort of come up with that insight for you, or trying to sort of prompt the right kind of business questions from the data in order to come up with that insight. I think it's interesting, isn't it? There's been so much about the GPT, the chatbot, in the last couple of weeks that have reminded people that that's very much on the roadmap for data visualization as well. Yeah. And I watch that. I wait there with interest. It can be fascinating to see how that goes. Some of the things that the AI chat can do is it blows your mind, considering even the progress that's been made in the last year or two. And I think it's fairly inevitable that will come into visualization as well.
I absolutely agree. Yeah, I think it's getting easier and easier to design data visualizations without even knowing most of the visual best practices, because the tools are trying to hard code that in there and help you along the way. Even with Tableau's new color scheme, where kind of the blue and orange has taken over the reds and greens, because of accessibility, making sure that those with color blindness can see. And I think we're going to see more and more of that evolution. So it's definitely been interesting. Now we're going to do the giveaway, and then I have a final question for you, Neil. I'm going to share this screen here. So hashtag books, we've got 74 people that have decided to play. You're going to get a copy of ColorWise. So let's see. And yeah, if you see yourself up there as a winner, just send me a note and I'll make sure. Omid, congratulations. I will be sending you a book after the show, so feel free to reach out. I love the little confetti. It's so cool. All right. All right, Neil. So the final question I always love to ask my guests is, where can people go to learn more? In your case, where do they go to pick up a book? Where do they go if they want to continue this conversation?
Well, they can you can get the book from all well-known online booksellers, I'm sure. Just look for questions in Dataviz. That should be easy enough. I mean, to continue the conversation, I also have questions in dataviz.com, which is the blog which kind of started it all off. So a lot of what's in the book has kind of evolved from that. And also from that, I love to do a lot of book reviews as well. So you can see all sorts of books around the industry as well. And if you just want to keep up the conversation, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on Twitter as well, where I'm at the Neil Richards. So you'll see me share all sorts of stuff that I think is cool. Occasionally even my own stuff. So
Awesome.
yeah, I'm always interested in the conversation. That's why I'm excited to be here. I love talking about all things data visualization.
All right. Well, Neil, I want to thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being our first show of the year and giving us all of these great insights. And I want to thank the audience for the amazing questions and the engagement that you provided today. Well, we'll see you next week with another chat, so stay tuned. And yeah, everybody, I'll see you online. Stay dedicated. This has been great. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Bye, everyone.